It is time for the NASCAR DFS strategy show right here on Awesemo.com. Of course, I am Jason Floyd, as always, joined by Race Sheets here on a Saturday afternoon. Phil, how's it going, man? I can't complain, man. I cannot complain on my end. Everything is good on my end. A beautiful day here in Tampa, ready to talk a little NASCAR DFS with you, man. Obviously, I've read some of the pieces that you have up over at Awesemo.com, and as always, like to start off the show by talking about some of the questions that you have, or I have exactly, in terms of this NASCAR DFS lineup. First off, let's talk about a little lineup construction and how many dominators you need. You wrote on Awesemo this week of 2 dominators is what you need, but maybe a sneaky third dominator could slip into your lineup.
Right. We have gone from a 400-lap race, a 500-lap race, and now we're back down to 267 at an intermediate track. So obviously, we apply the sliding scale rule that I talk about with your dominators. As the amount of laps decrease, so also does your need for dominators. So with 267, we're looking at the lower end with 2, and you could possibly look to 3, but that is only for DraftKings. For cash purposes on DraftKings, you're definitely looking at 2. Mm-hmm. I would not push that number to 3. We have a few drivers that are priced up that we'll get to later, like a William Byron, like a Jimmy Johnson, that will easily outscore probably what a third dominator does via their place differential. But if you're looking to get a little out there with your GPP lineups, you could remove those guys, add a third dominator in there in case the laps get split a little more evenly.
Another thing you wrote about this week was about Kevin Harvick being on the pole. 5th time this year. I guess technically you could say 6th, but another was because of a technical issue. But when you look at in terms of the 5th pole this year for Harvick, is it a potential fade? And you mentioned about the other 4 times he's won the pole here, or been on the pole, I guess you should say. Kansas led 9 laps, finished 4th. Daytona Road Course led 0 laps, finished 17th. Daytona led 6 laps, finished 20th. Richmond led 41 laps, finished 7th. So what's kind of your take in terms of Kevin Harvick as a pole sitter and in terms of our roster construction?
Right. Harvick already stands out to us this week because he is the most expensive driver on both sides. Now, 13.5 for Harvick on FanDuel, I mean, that's so-so because we've had drivers near the 15,000 mark this year. But that 11.7 price for Kevin on DraftKings, that's you're getting into tough territory for him to hit that 5x, that 6x, and especially when we only have 267 laps. And when you throw in those numbers that you just cited off about what he's done when he's been the pole sitter, it kind of scares you. Now, can we, I don't want to say make excuses, but can we rationalize what happened? Talked about at Kansas, he started right next to Joey Logano. Logano may be a better restarter than Harvick, and he initially lost the lead to Logano. Plus, in these night races at intermediate tracks, Harvick's setup hasn't really been so good. The 2 Daytona races, we're not going to hold those against him because of the very nature of Daytona. And then the Richmond race, he led 41 laps, but I think the main thing here is that even outside of those 2 Daytona races, he was still getting you a top 5 finish. Now, the technicality that you mentioned was you go back to the second race of the season, Harvick qualified 3rd, but Kyle Busch, who had won the pole, ended up failing inspection, and he got moved to the back. And as you all should know, when somebody in front of you fails inspection, you just move up in line. So that put Harvick on the pole. And as the pole sitter, he ended up leading the most laps that day in that race. Ended up with a top 10 finish. I believe he finished 8th that day. So he ended up being the top dominator that day. So it puts us in a pickle. Are we going to say that Harvick was a bad pole sitter in those previous races because of circumstances? Or are we just going to trust that Harvick on the pole at a track that he's been pretty good at, a track that he's won at, that he's going to be able to take advantage of this situation.
Yeah, that's something to definitely think about. Another question I had for you based on something you wrote this week over at Awesemo.com. Is it a team Penske week? As you noted, 3 of the last 4 Las Vegas wins have come from them. So what's your take on, maybe do we do a Penske stack here?
Yeah, it was something crazy that we were possibly looking at last week. And, the Keselowski lineups were looking awesome until he started to fade later in the race. But this is another track that Penske has all of the notes on. They have this track dialed in. We're talking about 3 of the last 4 Las Vegas winners have come from the Penske stable. 2 of them from Logano, 1 from Keselowski. All 3 of the Penske drivers have an average finish below 10. And in fact, if you look at Keselowski and Logano, Keselowski's average finish in the last 6 Vegas races is 4th, and Logano's average finish is 4.3. So, we're talking about dominant drivers at a track that they have genuinely excelled at, and we're kind of back in that idea where if you discount Harvick as a pole sitter because of whatever reasons that you're coming up with that, whether it be the things that we've listed or something else, then you could very well be looking at a Keselowski, Logano, and then Blaney as your third dominator.
Of course, we're going to break down this race in terms of tiers. We'll talk about the top drivers in Tier 1 who are in the 11K and 10K range on DK, and we'll work our way through Tier 2, 3, and 4. Plus, we'll answer your questions as we do go on, so fire those up in YouTube. Also in our premium Slack account, if you put the question over in Slack, you will get priority over there. Of course, this is a NASCAR DFS strategy show. Be sure to smash that like button right now here on YouTube. Of course, if for whatever reason you can't listen to us live, we are available on demand as a part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. All you got to do is go to awesemo.com right there at the top of the screen, click the podcast network. You'll get the link for the NASCAR DFS strategy show. Of course, we are here on Saturdays, 12 p.m. each time. Of course, we got a ton of coverage for you all day long over here at awesemo.com with NFL, NBA, MMA, MLB. So much coverage for you here today. But, Phil, let's talk about this Tier 1. We kind of talked a little about Kevin Harvick, 11,700 on DK, 13.5 on FanDuel. Also in this tier, we got Brad Keselowski will be starting 12th, Denny Hamlin starting 10th, Martin Truex Jr. starting 11th, Joey Logano starting 5th, and Kyle Busch starting 2nd. So we're kind of, obviously we've talked already a little bit about Kevin Harvick, but in terms of these top drivers as a part of this field tomorrow, is there one that's in the, I absolutely love him list, and is there someone in the I'm not so keen on that guy?
I think for the guy that, once again, we're in the home stretch of NASCAR DFS. So, I'm just going balls to the wall with my ownership. I don't care if I have 100% of a guy. If I go out in a blaze of glories, so be it. And a guy that I could very well end up owning 100% of in tournaments tomorrow, and probably just slamming him in cash as well, as Joey Logano. Mm-hmm. Logano, he hasn't exactly been the most consistent, especially at intermediate tracks since the return to racing. But you cannot ignore what he's done at Las Vegas. I highlighted it in my article. He's leading laps in every race. I believe in every race ever since 2014, he's led at least 40 laps or more, except for one race. We're talking about winner of 2 of the last 3 Las Vegas races. I mentioned it previous. He's got the second best average finish in this field at 4.3. Best driver rating in the field at 100, second best to Martin Truex Jr., but 118 driver rating. He has just been so impeccably good here. And you kind of have to just bet that whatever race notes that the team has, the mental notes that he has throughout the years coming here, that they're going to return, and that he's going to show his prowess tomorrow. Something that that NASCAR DFS Twitter has been mentioning this week, and I brought it to light in the article, is the left side tire being used is what was used at Kentucky, Texas, and believe the two Michigan races. If I average out those 4 races together, Guess who has the second best average finish? It's Joey Logano at 7.8. Of course, the best average finish in those races is Kevin Harvick. So, I mean, if you're looking for even more reason to play Kevin Harvick, there you go. But, I mean, I don't think that you can find a reason to get off of Joey Logano just outside of saying, well, you know, I'm gonna take a stance against these trends. And, you know, ownership wise, we've got him sitting at 34%, which it's high, but it's definitely not the highest driver, especially out of all of these dominator options. The guy in this range that I am probably going to have no ownership on, even though he starts second, is going to be Kyle Busch. It's the weirdest thing with Kyle. This is his hometown track. I mean, him and Kurt grew up racing in this area. There's a little short, I believe it's a little short asphalt track just outside of Las Vegas called the Bull Ring that he grew up racing in. And whether it be narrative that, you know, he just stinks racing in front of his hometown crowd or whatever it is, Kyle, you know, this has not been one of his better tracks. He has a lone win, one lone win here at Las Vegas, and you've got to go all the way back to 2009 to find that win. Beyond that, the most laps that he's led in a race here at Las Vegas has been 56, and that was in the 2008 race when he first started racing for Joe Gibbs. He's just got a bunch of mediocrity here at Las Vegas. And, you know, something that you're big on, Jason, I know, is, you know, what are the drivers saying? How are they feeling going into a race? I don't know if people saw this, but Kyle was interviewed before earlier this week. And, I mean, he's already – it sounds like he's just pretty much given up to the fact that following this round that he's out of the playoffs. Like he doesn't seem to believe that he's going to do well here. And then we go to Talladega, which, I mean, anything could happen there. And then you've got the Charlotte road course. So, I mean, Kyle already seems like he's just given to the point like, okay, you know, it's been a fun ride. It's been a very disappointing season, but here we are. And, you know, that kind of despondency from that and that attitude from Kyle, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, I don't like hearing that. I don't like hearing that at all. That just it sounds like a athlete that, I mean, has pretty much just said, okay, it's this season's over, and you're going through the motions. In terms of two of these guys that are in this top tier, we got a question from Dustin on Twitter. He says, "Who's a better play, Keselowski or Logano?" Keselowski 11,400 on DK, 13,000 on FanDuel. Logano 10,300 and 12,800 on FanDuel. What's your take?
This is tough because I think Brad may be the safer option because of his place differential starting 12th. But I mean, DraftKings and FanDuel are making you pay for that little extra place differential that they're throwing at you. While I think that Logano probably has a higher probability to lead more laps. So I would say, probably for the sake of saving the $1,100 and what that means you don't have to do at the bottom of your roster, I would be more inclined to go with Logano this weekend.
Hamlin and Truex Junior are starting 10th and 11th. Pretty much the same salary on FanDuel. They're only $100 difference. There's a $400 difference on DraftKings. What's your thoughts about Hamlin and Truex, where they're starting at in terms of kind of what is their path to being optimal tomorrow night?
You're going to need probably, if not the most laps led, you're going to need the second most laps led for these guys to be part of your optimal lineups. And, you know, I'm out on Hamlin this week. Las Vegas, he really hasn't been that good here. His last 6 finishes at Las Vegas go 17, 15, 10, 32nd, 17, and 6. And 2 of those races, he didn't end up finishing on the lead lap. He's only averaging 0.7 laps led and 3.5 fastest laps during these 6 races on average. So, I mean, Hamlin has not really been that good. And Hamlin's calling card at these intermediate tracks has been afternoon into night races. And although this is going to be a late start for many of us on the East Coast and Central Time Zone, this is going to be a early afternoon finishing into the late afternoon. So, I mean, this is not going to be a race that they're going to be finishing under the stars whatsoever. I don't think this is going to play into Hamlin's hands. Now, Martin Truex Jr., he's a guy that you should have some exposure to as a potential dominator. He's got 2 wins here in the last 6 races. He's been nearly just as good as Logano. His blemish is a 20th place finish in the spring here. But if you go back to the loop data pages and look at who was where at the end of the first segment and at the end of the second segment, Truex was there. He was hanging around, then ran into some issues late in the race. In fact, that whole race itself was such a weird outing, because if you look at who finished in the top 5, of course Logano won, but then you had Matty D finishing second, you had Austin Dillon finishing third, you had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. finishing third, and then Austin Dillon finishing fourth. Bubba Wallace finishing sixth. There were a lot of guys that played pit strategy, and it paid off for them in that race. So there's just a lot of weird things about that spring race. But, that's all to say that Truex, add him to your player pool, especially as a dominator option.
Of course, if you want to get access to our ownership projections, driver projections, the top drivers tool, you got to sign up right now for a NASCAR weekly pass. You see it right there on the left-hand side of the screen for $9.95. You can go there. That link is right there. You just type it into your browser or go to awesemo.com. Right there on the top left-hand side, you'll see Awesemo Plus. Click that, and then you can sign up for a NASCAR weekly pass, give you access to all the premium content and tools that Alex puts together every week to help you win money, whether you're playing on DraftKings, maybe you're playing on FanDuel, maybe you're playing on Super Draft, wherever you play at. Those tools are right there. You got to take advantage of them. I know I base my lineups off of this conversation that I have with Phil, and looking at Alex's projections, whatnot. That's how I put together my lineups. And and there was an interesting point that I want to say you brought up before we started the show here today, Phil, of because of the start time of this race on Sunday, there might be some good opportunities because of what the player pool could be.
Right. I mean, this is something that we run into every year. And I didn't believe it when I first started playing NASCAR DFS, but it is a real and it's a tangible thing that when NFL season starts, the field gets softer. And you would think, well, how could that be? Because you're left with the hardcore NASCAR DFS players. Well, what's happening is all of the whales who are throwing in thousands of dollars each week, mass entering everything that they can get their hands on. Well, are you going to chase a $50,000 top prize with NASCAR, or are you going to take your money over to NFL and try to win the Millie Maker? I mean, we know that the Millie Maker is just a gigantic lottery ticket, but $1 million compared to $50K, it's no big question there. So what I'm thinking is the last couple of weeks, because we've had Saturday night races, that perhaps the whales have still been playing because it hasn't interfered that much with their process about getting lineups ready for NFL DFS. But this week it's a whole different equation, because this race starts in the late afternoon. These guys are either going to have all of their money tied up in the full day or the afternoon slate, and they still haven't gotten paid out from the early games. And then also they're doing research, getting ready for the Sunday night showdown slate. So there's a big opportunity, if you're willing to play this weekend, to take advantage of the softer field, because the whales are going to be consumed elsewhere.
Yeah, it's something you definitely you got to take advantage of. That's why you got to sign up for that Awesemo Plus NASCAR Weekly Pass for $9.95. Take advantage of all those premium contents and tools that we have, and join the conversation over in our premium Slack account for our subscribers. That can help you out a lot as well. Kind of get an idea of how everyone else is viewing this slate. Now, looking into Tier 2, the first driver I want to mention is Ryan Blaney, starting 15th. He's 9,100 on DK, 11,500 on FanDuel, so a little noticeable difference in terms of salary there. Obviously, could be a potential dominator, and the reason I bring that up is something that you wrote in your preview piece earlier this week. You embedded a tweet in your story that was about the left side tires that Goodyear will be using here. And in terms of some of the drivers, in terms of Kentucky and Texas, where this package was used this year, where your fastest laps came from Blaney, who had 119, Amarola 78, Truex 40, Kurt Busch 33. So kind of talk to our viewers about this tire package and why it is so effective and how we can use it for DFS in terms of construction of our lineups.
Right. For whatever reason, Goodyear decided, okay, we're going to run a different tire package here than we ran previously back in February. The right side tire has never been ran before, so good luck trying to guess what is going to happen with that. But the left side tire is what we've seen in the 2 Michigan races, and we're not really talking about Michigan that much because you're talking about a 2-mile super speedway compared to a mile and a half intermediate oval. But it was also ran at Kentucky and Texas, the back-to-back weekends that were pretty hot. And this weekend in Las Vegas, I do believe the heat index is hovering around 100 degrees. So you're going to have similar scenarios, similar situations, low tire track. So it's like, okay, let's contrast and compare who ran well in those races, and perhaps it translates into this weekend. And like you said, Blaney ended up with the most fastest laps. Now, he ended up with the second most fastest laps, I do believe, in that Kentucky race, even though he barely led maybe 2 or so. But then you fast forward to that next week, the 12 team takes their race notes into Texas, a track that he's been pretty good at throughout his career, and he ends up leading the most laps. And if it wasn't for a really weird late race caution, there's a good chance that Blaney inherits the lead and goes on to win that race. So we say, okay, he did really well with that tire package. We're going to Las Vegas, a track that he has been consistently he's done consistently well at. His finishes here have gone 11th, 5th, 22nd, 5th, 5th, 7th. So just in line with the Penske corollary, a track that we know that he can get to the front at. He's done well in this tire package. It all adds up for Blaney. I don't project him to lead the most laps, but he could very well lead the second, but probably the third most laps tomorrow.
Is he more of a play on DK as opposed to FanDuel?
Yeah. I believe at 11.5, he's kind of unattainable on FanDuel unless you believe that he's going to lead the first or the second most laps in tomorrow's race. Then full steam ahead. But at 9,100, he fits what you need from a driver that could probably lead somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 laps and then get 20 to 30 fastest laps.
Looking at the rest of this tier, we got Chase Elliott starting 3rd, William Byron 28th, Jimmy Johnson 18th, Kurt Busch 9th, Eric Jones 13th, Eric Amarola 4th, Clint Boyer at 6th. Looking at some, I would say somewhat notable price differences between DK and FanDuel. Chase Elliott 9,700 on DK, but 12,300 over on FanDuel. And then the other one would be Eric Amarola, 8,300 on DK, but 11,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, it's been the weirdest tale with FanDuel where they just refuse to remove Eric's salary, like not in remove, but in just drop. Mm-hmm. He should probably be somewhere closer to where Eric Jones is on FanDuel, around that 8K to 9K range, but they keep him elevated. So it really kind of makes him unattainable on FanDuel. But on DraftKings, he's in the conversation as a semi dominator. You mentioned it. Almirola had the second most fast laps in those 2 races. I believe Almirola ended up leading the most laps in that Kentucky race. If I look at all 4 of those races that use that same left side tire, averaging 22.3 fastest laps and 43 laps led. So Almirola's in the conversation as a second or third dominator for DraftKings, but I don't think that you're going in that area for FanDuel. An interesting pivot off of Blaney is on DraftKings is either going to be William Byron starting 28th at 9,400 or Jimmy Johnson starting 18th at 8,900. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the preferred way to go in cash, is instead of playing Blaney as a third dominator, you either go to Byron or you go to Johnson. Then you're probably going to play Byron just because he's safer with that place differential. Kurt Busch, he's a guy that should be in our minds as a GPP play, as a guy that, maybe get you a top 5 finish. But oddly enough, Kurt is just like his brother Kyle. He has not been that good here at Las Vegas. You look at his finishes, they go 25, 39, 5th, 21st, 35th, 30th. Only one lead lap finish out of those 6 races. I mean, it's odd how both the Busch brothers could be bad at their hometown track, but they have found a way.
That's an awesome line. Let's get a question here from Wyatt. Says, how do you feel about Chase Elliott and the Hendrick cars? Chase Elliott, 9,700 on TK, 12,300 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Chase's salary on FanDuel kind of it surprises me. But I mean, we're talking about a driver that's starting third, and if you want to use that spring, I'm going to call it spring, but it was late February. If you want to use that spring race as a corollary, Chase was leading after the first segment, and he was leading after the second segment. He spun out all by himself, I believe, with about 40 to go, and that's why he ended up in 26th. I believe a couple of laps down, but beyond that weird that single car spin, he was probably on his way to leading the most laps in that race. So I mean, you've probably got to give Chase some credence as a potential dominator this week. I like him better for DraftKings than I do for FanDuel, though.
Yeah, that's a noticeable difference in terms of salary. I mean, that's definitely something that sticks out to you here. William Byron starting 28th in terms of place differential. Do you like that as a play, or do you think the salary is not ideal in terms of that, because there's some other place differentials that we're going to get to here momentarily that you like a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. Byron is expensive, and oddly enough, when you look at his average finish in those 4 races, the 2 Michigan races, Kentucky and Texas, his average finish was only 18.5. So that's not that fantastic, and his history here at Las Vegas really hasn't been that great. We're talking about 1 top 10 finish. That would have been last year's fall race, which, that's encouraging because that's where we're at again. But the rest of those finishes have gone 22nd, 16th, 37th, and 27th. So, you could be paying a lot of money for Byron's place differential without there really being that much of a ceiling for Byron. So, Byron's probably the safe play in cash, but getting off of him in tournaments may be the better option.
I mentioned about there's some other place differential, and I have 4 that I've written down. They're all in tier 3, so this is the 6K and 7K drivers. So, we can just talk about these 4. Get your take on these 4. And the 4 that I have is Matty D, Stenhouse Junior, Bell, and Chris Buescher.
Right. Okay, Matty D, I've got him listed as a GPP play this week just because he doesn't start outside of the top 20 and his salary is a little up there. But I mean, since we're only really kind of focusing on 2 dominators this week, you're probably going to end up with a little more salary than you're used to these last couple of weeks. So if you end up with DiBenedetto as a cash play, I'm not going to fault you for that. We go back to the spring. He ran really well here. He finished second. We've got the Penske corollary because the Wood brothers is an offshoot of Penske. So you hope that whatever race notes that the Penske has, that it's kind of funneling its way to the Wood brothers. You've got Stenhouse Junior. He's probably going to be the most owned driver in cash this week, starting 33rd. He didn't get the price bump that DraftKings normally gives to a driver starting this far back. Because I mean, we've seen him above the 9K range when he had place differential before. So I think that he's probably better suited for cash, but we have seen a couple of ceiling races out of Stenhouse here before. Of course, we mentioned the 3rd place finish in the spring. You go back to the spring race of 2019, he finished 6th. His average finish here since 2017 is 18.7. So I mean, we're kind of probably talking about 12 to 15 positions that he should gain throughout the race. Christopher Bell, another guy that's probably better suited for cash, but we really don't know what his potential ceiling could be here at Las Vegas. He had a horrible race at Las Vegas back in February. The 95 team did not start the season off well. They raced horribly here in the spring, 33rd, and then they went to Auto Club and finished 38th. So, we're going to say what happened earlier in the year isn't reflective of what that team is capable of doing. So hopefully, he's probably more along the lines of a 15th place finish. And Buescher is your tournament pivot. Starting 16th, I would not play him in cash, but he gives you appeal as a 13th to a 16th place driver probably. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of hoping that he hangs around on the lead lap, that while the rest of these guys priced around him lose their lap, and thus they lose their ability to gain more points because they're just kind of stuck where they are.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions, it's kind of a question that I was going to bring up today on the MMA show that me and Peter are going to do, is like, when you're building your roster, and you say, okay, and let's just say from a single entry player, you're going to have that one driver that you're the most confident. It's that driver in tier 1. You're like, you know what? I want him in my lineup. But then there's got to be a punt play. Okay. Because that's how I always kind of look at in developing. When I'm hand building lineups, I'm like, let me get the person I really want. Let me get my low end. And then let me kind of fill the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. Do you think you can do that with Chris Buescher being your low end guy? Or do you think you have to go a little underneath him?
No, I think that, once again, because of, we're not placing so much emphasis on getting multiple dominators this week as in 3 or 4. I think you can do that, where you can bookmark Buescher as your low owned guy, and then watch that average remaining bump up itself and say, okay, this is where I can work with for the rest of my roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you got to consider here. As we look at some of the other ones in this tier, Matt Kenseth, who's starting 20th, 6,500 on DK, 7,300 on FanDuel. I want to mention this question from Wyatt. Says, Wyatt, here you go. Are you playing any Matt Kenseth this weekend?
I don't know what to do with Kenseth, honestly. He's cheap, but he really doesn't have that much place differential. And the last time that Kenseth raced at this track was the spring race of 2017. Every other race he's missed because he's been retired, or when he was filling in for a driver that, they'd already raced at Las Vegas and he didn't have to fulfill that race. So what we get out of Matt at a track that he's seen plenty of times in his career, but that he hasn't seen since 2017, I'm just not too sure. I've got him listed as a GPP play. If you're playing cash, I think the safer option is to go up to Custer or go down to John Hunter Nemechek, but Kenseth could very well pay off in the same mold as Chris Buescher, as a guy that moves up enough, hangs on to the lead lap, and gains points via his finishing position and outscores everyone else around him.
Another question we got in relation to someone in this tier, that is Alex Bowman starting 8th, 7,300 on DK, 9,000 on FanDuel. And Wyatt says, how you feeling about Bowman this weekend? He's cheap and he has okay track history combined with a Hendricks car.
Yeah, Bowman is another guy that you could Bowman's so cheap that you could potentially play him as a third dominator, but you're really not needing that from him, so to say. Like I could easily see Bowman going out there, knocking down about 15 to 20 fastest laps, leading maybe 30 to 35 himself, gaining those dominator points, bringing home a top 5 finish, and easily outscoring everybody else around him because of his finishing position and those few dominator points that he got. The key to Bowman is we always look to him when the temperatures cool down. Now, this is definitely not going to be that case with Las Vegas and the heat that it's going to be and as slick as it's going to be tomorrow. But Bowman has shown in previous races that he can handle Las Vegas in this same kind of weather, temperature, climate race at Las Vegas last year. He finished 6th.
Yeah, something in terms of some of the rest of the drivers that we've not mentioned in this one. Michael McDowell, he's at the low end of this tier, 6,100 on DK, 5,500 on FanDuel. He's starting 17th. You mentioned a little bit about Nemechek. You listed a little bit about Cole Custer. Bubba Wallace is 23rd, 6,700 on DK, 6,500 on FanDuel. Tyler Reddick starting 14th, 6,900 on DK, 7,800 on FanDuel. Austin Dillon, here's one that's got a price difference between the two slates. He's 7,600 on DK, but 10,500 on FanDuel. He is starting 7th, though.
Okay, yeah. Austin's probably hands off on FanDuel because you at that price you need laps led, and I just don't know if that's what you're going to get from Dillon. Yes, he's kind of broken the mold, and he did that the previous weeks before. But Dillon is averaging 0.5 laps led on average over the last 6 Las Vegas races. I don't see that trend kind of reversing itself. And I mean, Dillon is racing great, and the fact that he made it to the second round, that's awesome for himself. So does he have a top 10 finish in him? Yes. So that kind of makes him viable on DraftKings at 7,600, but that doesn't make him viable at 10,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, that's something you gotta take a look at it. That salary difference. Let's look at tier 4. So this is drivers at the very bottom of the tiers here, in the 4K or 5K and 4K range here. Ty Dillon, 24th. He's the top of this one. 5,900 on DK, 5,000 on FanDuel. And then it's kind of the usual cast of characters. I guess the only one to mention would be Chad Fincham, 39th, 5,200 on DK, but bare minimum 3,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Chad. God knows what weird shenanigans are happening behind the scenes at these smaller teams and why guys are picking up rides this late in the season. But Chad's making a spot start. I mean, at starting 39th, he doesn't have anywhere to go, so he's not going to go in the negative. But just what his actual ceiling is, it's probably minimal at best. This will be Chad's first time racing at Vegas in the Cup Series. I'm probably staying away from him. If you're down in this range for your cash team, I don't mind Corey LaJoie at 5,500 on DraftKings, 4,000 on FanDuel. He's got some place differential. He's done fairly well at these intermediate tracks. Like, if you look at the race sheets, I've got the daytime intermediate races averaged out next to the Las Vegas averages, and his average finish is 22.9. So, I mean, 5,500 for a driver that's going to possibly finish 22nd, 23rd, get you 9 place differential points. That's doable. The rest of these guys, I mean, you're taking shots, but the honest to the goodness fact is, unless you are going a Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, Harvick, Keselowski, Truex build, you probably don't need to mess around with these guys at all. Like, at the most, you might have to play around with one, but definitely if you find yourself double dipping in this area, then you just need to hit the clear button and start over with your lineup.
Yeah, as you mentioned Corey LaJoie actually is going to ask a question if you're going to dip your hands into that. But we'll talk about some of the other questions that we've got in here. But do want to let you know about a promo we have going on over right now at Awesemo.com for an NFL Weekly Express Pass for only $3.95. That's right, $3.95. The Express Pass now includes everything you need for NFL Showdown and single game contest formats. You get access to Awesemo Showdown, single game player projections, ownership projections, the top plays tool when you purchase this pass, in addition to the player rankings, lineup builder light, ownership rankings, and the Top Stacks Express tool. It's our best offering for an Express Pass, so head over to awesemo.com/join to purchase your $3.95 NFL Express Pass today. So you got to check out when you're looking to make those NFL lineups coming up for tomorrow afternoon. Someone who I think probably said this very jokingly about putting Quinn Hoff in their lineup. I guess give me your take on that one.
Oh, just for kicks and grins, let's see what Mr. Half has done in the 4 races with this package. I'm gonna have to do a little control F here to even find him. Okay, his average finish is 32 in those 4 races, and he starts 32nd himself. Half finished 32nd in the spring race. That was after starting 32nd. I mean, it's 32s for Quinn. It's impeccable.
Consistency. Yeah. It's consistent.
Yeah, it's if nothing else, it's consistency. To be frank, in this area, I'm probably looking to either JJ Yaley, and I mean he's the guy that I always land on, and it's for good reason. He's got speed, he's got talent. You look at those 4 races that I previously mentioned, his average finish is 27.3. That is better than John Hunter Nemechek, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Ryan Preece, and it's barely worse than Alex Bowman. So Yaley is probably your preferred punt play at 5,100 on DraftKings. Yeah, he gives you place. He gives you place differential. Other than that, Gray Galding is actually kind of popping off here too. Yeah, Galding's only got 1 race in these 4 races, but it was a finish of 25th. And Galding here at Las Vegas, we don't really have any information for, but I mean, Galding has been, he's been a so-so driver, so to say. If we look, if we look at him in this at intermediate tracks this year, really don't have anything else to go off besides that 25th place finish. So I think you're probably looking at Galding, you're looking at Yaley, you may be looking at Billicky. For whatever reason, Brennan Poole, even though he's back in his car, got priced down to 4,600 on DraftKings. So, and he finished 29th in this spring race. If we look at what he's done at intermediate tracks and day races, his average finish is 30.9. So, I mean, if you absolutely need to punt, Brennan Poole might be your guy.
Someone had asked about 2 favorite punt plays. So, would you say JJ Yelly and Brennan Poole would kind of be at the top or near the top of that list?
Yeah, I'd say Yaley if you're trying to find a ceiling out of these guys, but if you just need to punt, then there's no reason not to go with the cheapest guy, and that's Brennan Poole.
Yeah, it's in terms of roster construction, you got to figure that out. Someone asking who would be your favorite among these 3: Stenhouse, or Austin Dillon, and Matty D. I'm
gonna side with Matty D because I think he's got the best access to a ceiling out of these guys. The more and more I dig into these numbers, especially after looking at those 4 races with this left side tire package, the more and more I'm worrying about Stenhouse.
Even with the place differential with Stenhouse, though, starting 33rd.
Yeah, it's like probably on the worst end for him. He could start 33rd and maybe move himself up to 27th, and that scares me. But then again, we don't want to get ourselves lost too much in left side tires.
We mentioned about Christopher Bell's potential as a place differential. Let's go back 1 spot behind him. Ryan Newman at 27th.
Yeah, Newman didn't race in the spring race for obvious reasons because he was laying in a hospital. But you look at his recent history here at Las Vegas, and it's been fairly consistent. 10th place in the fall race last year, and then 24th, 9th in the inaugural fall Las Vegas race, and then 11th and 17th. So if you're looking for something to put your hat on, in the 2 times that NASCAR has raced here in the heat with the slick conditions at the track, although they be for two different teams. The year ago it was for Roush, and then 2 years ago it was for Richard Childress. 2 top 10 finishes, and you're getting Newman starting 27th. Yeah, I mean, that's, to be frank, if you're looking at Stenhouse Jr. or Newman in tournaments, I'm going to tell you Newman 100% of the time.
I want to mention a question that came in from on YouTube from The Truth. He missed the first part of the show when we were talking about Kevin Harvick, so we'll kind of rehash on that a little bit. And his question was, is Harvick a auto play? Obviously, if people were listening first part of the show, they know the answer to this, but I did want to mention that question since the listener did miss the first part of the show.
I think in order for Harvick to be an auto play, he has to be the top dominator. At that salary, at 13.5 on FanDuel, 11.7 on DraftKings, you need him to be the top dominator. And to be frank, you look at the averages, he is and has been the top dominator, averaging 75.8 laps led, 30.3 fastest laps. This is the Harvick play is purely about him meeting salary expectations. And, we hashed this out earlier in the video. You can read about this in the article where I talk about it, where he's been pretty disappointing this year as a pole sitter, but his one lone bright spot has been when he technically inherited the pole in the first Las Vegas race, when he ended up being the top dominator. So I say for cash, you probably are locking him in, but you have a multitude of reasons to go elsewhere in tournaments.
I want to mention a driver that I don't think we talked about earlier, and that was Eric Jones, who started 13th. Very similar pricing, $8,500 on DK, $8,300 on FanDuel.
Jones, not safe for cash, obviously, but he's a guy that you could consider in tournaments. I probably won't have any ownership of him. Now that the thing that I keep coming back to with Jones is like mentally where he's at week to week, because we still don't know what he's doing next year as per his ride. The 42 came off the market. Chastain's taking that ride for next season. The big news broke that Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin are starting a team with the 13 teams charter, and that's where Bubba Wallace is going to race next year. So time's clicking. We still don't know where Jones is going to end up next year, and I don't know where that puts him mentally. He had a great race last week, but what that looks like this week at a race that he has an average finish of 22.5 over the last 6 races, I think I'm going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I saw that little blurb on Jordan and Bubba Wallace. I thought that was an interesting combination, just in terms of kind of obviously Michael dipping his toes in NASCAR.
Yeah, and it's funny that this was a rumor that showed up more than 2 decades ago. Like, Michael has been oddly interested in pursuing this, and him and Hamlin became friends. Hamlin is a representative of the Jumpman brand, and they're putting their collective money together, and they're gonna go after this. I posted a poll earlier in this week about what everybody's expectations for this team is going to be, and most people think that this is going to be a top 20 team. So it kind of seems like people think that we're just replacing the 95 team and transferring it over to this with Bubba. But I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see just how much money gets put into R&D and what Jordan really is willing to invest into this team to have a championship caliber team.
Yeah, that's something it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. A couple more questions. Tyler Reddick, is he starting too high?
Reddick starting 14th. You're probably getting him maxed out where I would suspect him to finish. He finished 18th here in the spring. So Reddick, it's tough to see him outscoring everybody else just simply because of where he starts.
Next, someone asked about our favorite punt play under 6K. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but are we saying it's JJ Yeley?
Yeah, it's JJ Yeley, and if you need extra value beyond that, it's Brennan Poole.
Next up, Lane says, do you favor Harvick or Hamlin?
That's easy. That would be Harvick over Hamlin this week.
Yeah, I mean, but also, for me, it's always about what's the ownership look like. That's what I'm always going to look at. Of hey, is there going to be a drastic difference in ownership where, especially if you're a multiple line player, kind of using that to your advantage.
Yeah, and looking at our top drivers tool, we've got Harvick at 21% and Hamlin at 17%.
Yeah. So something to play into. Of course, this all goes down tomorrow in Las Vegas, so plenty of time to get your lineups in. Of course, if you ever have a question, NASCAR question, you can hit up Phil in our premium Slack account or the NASCAR channel, so check it out there. Also, you can follow Phil on Twitter at RaySheets. Of course, this show is also available in audio form as a part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. Go over to awesemo.com. We'll give you the links for all that, of course, and be sure to sign up for a NASCAR weekly pass where you get it for $9.95, so you get access to all the great premium contents and tools that we have over at awesemo.com. So that is going to do it for this edition of the NASCAR DFS show right here on awesemo.com.